you said, such a great session this one will be, and collaboration in the marine environment is just so important, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm really pleased to be able to chair this one. And the first speaker we have today is Alex Purdie from the Alderney Wildlife Trust, who will be talking about the impacts of climate change and warming seas on crabs.
Thanks, Julia. Oh no, I'm not Peter. I could do some intros while I'm here. So, good morning. I'm Alex Purdie. I'm a marine biologist with the Alderney Wildlife Trust. Usually, what I do, what I've done previously in these conferences, is I've presented about seabirds and I show people lots of bits of puffins, and everyone goes, "Ah, oh, that's nice," and they clap, and it's great. But today, I'm going to talk to you about crabs, which I think are as charismatic as puffins, but not everyone will agree. I think we'll get there in a moment. What I will do first, though, this is quite a good opportunity because I have some props, and I wasn't really sure how to manage it. So, that's going. That's some crab shells and lobsters. It will become apparent why I forgot about the online guys. Sorry. And then that one's a little bit better.
And it's frozen.
So this is my fault because we moved at the last minute Alex back to the end of the session because he's literally just arrived from the airport. And we thought to give him more time, I moved him to the end of the session, but I didn't tell anyone. So this, I completely hold my hands up. This is my fault. Sorry, Alex.
I'll put that back. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Alex. I'm from the Alderney Wildlife Trust, and I'm going to present to you about crabs. In particular, we're going to be talking about how we've been monitoring the arrival of a new species using citizen science. Before we get onto that, though, I'd like you to cast your minds back to 2017. So, it was Donald Trump's first inauguration as president. Hull was the UK City of Culture, and Despacito was top of the charts. But in Alderney, we were focused on crabs. So fishers had noticed declining stocks and increasing disease, and a new species had been recorded on the island. So crabs are really important in Alderney. We have a fishing fleet. Our only commercial fishing fleet is our potters, and brown crabs are the main stock. Also, I'm sure people here from islands will understand this, but we have a strong cultural connection to the shore. You know, people will always be going down to the seashore. And I think crabs are kind of the pandas of the seashore. You ask anyone what a crab is, and they know what it is. Anyone can go find a crab. You know, I like bryozoans, but you can't tell a member of the public to go and find a bryozoan. Everyone knows what a crab is. And of course, they are important for the ecology of the intertidal zone and subtidal zone. They're mobile predators. They're moving nutrients in and out of that habitat, so they are very important. Because of this, the Wildlife Trust felt it was important to do something. So we start off back in 2017 with some preliminary surveys, and we wanted to look at what species are there, is the new species problem, and are there signs of that disease in the intertidal zone? So first I'll just run through the species we found, and if you have the crab box in your hand now, you will see helpfully labelled some of the species with their shells. We have edible crabs, also known as chancres in the Channel Islands, green shore crabs, which of course are invasive in lots of parts of the world, but they are native to the UK and the Channel Islands, velvet swimming crabs, and a range of kind of more infrequent encountered species like hairy crabs. We then had two species which are quote unquote new. So that's the furrowed crab on the left, and we then have its kind of smaller, hairier cousin, the Risso's crab on the right. For this presentation, I'm going to focus on the big three. So that's edible crabs and green shore crabs, which are our most common native species, and the furrowed crabs as well. So, those preliminary surveys, what did we find out? Well, in 2017 and 2018, it is just a couple of surveys, and it's basically looking under rocks. Kind of saw what you'd expect to see. quite a few green shore crabs, some edible crabs, and actually not picking up the furrows in those surveys. Fast forward to 2020, 2021, and the picture's changed a bit. So I'll highlight that there. You can see we are doing more surveys, but we're now picking up furrow crabs, and you'll see there the ratio of furrow crab to edible crab was 1:1 in 2020, and it's almost 1:2 in 2021 even. These surveys weren't completely standardised, so I'd be hesitant to say too much about that change, but they do look like they're increasing. We also saw signs of disease. So if anyone has the box without the lid on, there's an edible crab shell there with some of the disease markings. So edible crabs get this disease called kind of type 1 shell disease. It's erosion of the cuticle, these black spots. And if you pick up that crab shell and turn it over, you'll see that it actually goes all the way through the cuticle. This is probably caused by an imbalance in the microbiome on the cuticle rather than a particular disease. But we did pick it up in Alderney. I would say, though, it's not just a simple story because the crab on the left is a furrow crab, which is also showing signs of that disease. Okay, the preliminary surveys did have some big drawbacks. Namely, they're not standardised, and that means you can't really tell what's going on. But we're a small wildlife trust. We don't have a huge amount of resources or staff, so how can we do it? Well, our answer was citizen science. So this is our group of volunteers, or some of our volunteers, and we have a little marine group which goes out and does citizen science surveys with us. So we designed a new survey called a crab survey for our marine group to carry out. And this involved doing transects, and you'd select rocks every 2 meters along a transect line, and we'd repeat them in similar areas. We would record the abundance of all species and biometrics, so size, does it have eggs, things like that, of target species. They can be conducted with as few as 2 or more than 10 people, and they're very popular, as you can see by the fact that they're there in pouring rain, and they are still having fun, I promise, doing the crab surveys. So on to the results. So we've been running those more standardised surveys from 2022 or end of 21 now, and they're still going. So the first result we're going to look at is abundance, or in other words, how many crabs are there underneath the rock? This graph is a bit confusing. I don't really like it, and I made it. Along the x-axis is dates from 22 to 26, and then that's the abundance. And each dot represents a survey point. The lines just give you a bit of an idea for the trends over time. I'd like to draw your attention to this bit, though, on the right-hand side. So what we're seeing here is an increase in abundance in green shore crab. Brilliant. We were really worried about green shore crab because we barely saw any of them. And they seem to be getting more abundant. Great. But there is something else going on, because when you look at the locations, pretty much all of those green shore crabs in 24 and 25 are coming from one bay. We survey in 3 bays. They're all from Longy. What's going on? When we look at Longy, these are the sites we've surveyed. They're pretty much all from this site I've circled in gold at the top. And what's different about that site? Well, it's got freshwater input. So we actually started surveying that site because our volunteers were interested to see if there would be a difference between areas with freshwater and areas without. And I would say these are very preliminary results, but it looks like there might be. On the left, we have areas without freshwater, and you have furrow crabs, very abundant, and there aren't many shore crabs at all. On the right, areas with freshwater, furrow crabs are pretty much non-existent, and the shore crabs are really abundant. So, I think it's interesting. If we go back to that graph, though, which shows our overall trends over time, this is including Longy, which has that site with the freshwater. But if we remove Longy, it tells quite a different story. So with Longy removed, you're actually seeing in areas where we've surveyed continuously since 2022, a decline in the green shore crabs. And at the same time, of course, the furrow crabs, which is this purple line, have boomed. They've done really well. What I would say is that's a young population. The oldest furrow crab we're going to have in Alderney is like 7 years old. And it does look like there might be a bit of a plateau. So in 5 years' time, it might be a very different picture to what it is now. As I said, I find that graph very confusing. So I've come up with a different way to talk to you about the abundance as well. And that is, instead of looking at how many crabs are under a rock, It's how many rocks do you need to turn over to find one crab? So we'll start with the edible crabs. Since 2022, we've had to turn over, on average, 8 rocks to find one edible crab. Stayed pretty consistent since 2022. Compare that to the furrowed crabs. In 2022, you had to turn over 3 rocks on average to find one furrowed crab. Now, you have to turn over 1 rock. The green shore crabs tell a very different story. So in 2022, you had to look under 11 rocks, and that's outside of those areas of freshwater. By 2023, you were looking under 20 rocks to find one green shore crab. By 2024, it's 90 to find one green shore crab on average. And in 2025, outside of those freshwater areas, we haven't found a single green shore crab. Okay, we're going to look at some of the biometric results now, so things like size. I've pulled this graph up. I've got green shore crab on the left, furrowed crab on the right, and it's the sizes of the different sexes. So females red, males green, etc. And the width of that plot tells you how many crabs were of different sizes. What I want to pull your attention to, though, is this area. So with the green shore crab, we see a distribution where you've got quite a lot of little ones and then not so many big ones. And the reason for that is probably because shore crabs, juveniles, will stay in the intertidal zone. As they get bigger, they migrate with the tide. Compare that to the furrowed crab, where it's a really normal distribution. And to us, that's implying that they might, we might pick up all of those age cohorts in the intertidal zone. This is supported by the number of crabs with eggs. So we're seeing up to 95% of females with eggs in the intertidal zone. And some of them are tiny. Some of them are seriously small. If you've got that box of crab shells, the smallest crab in there, easily seeing crabs like that with eggs. Onto the edible crabs. So again, like green shore crabs, the little ones stay in the intertidal zone. The bigger ones, they'll move offshore and eventually they go way subtidal. You'll notice though, what I haven't done here is I haven't separated it by sex. That's not because there's no difference. It's because out of the kind of 65 edible crabs we've found since 2021, 5 of them have been female. So we have a sex ratio of around 1 female to 14 males in the intertidal zone. That's not normal. In Anglesey, they were picking up a sex ratio of around 1 to 1.7, and in Cornwall you had more females than males in similar habitats. You might think, is this a sampling error? Small edible crabs are hard to sex. But if that was the case, we'd expect to see, yes, an imbalance, and us picking up more males in the small ones, but you'd expect to see it much more balanced with the big crabs, which are easy to sex. And we don't see that. So yeah, that is concerning. Now, what's going on? What's happening? So firstly, as we covered, furrowed crabs have become the most abundant on the rocky shore in just a few short years. This is the climate change driven shift. There's no two ways about it. They've moved up from the south as temperatures have warmed, and they've been able to move into our seas. Changes like these are only going to continue. I'm sure there's lots of talks talking about things like this, but this is a really obvious example of a climate change driven shift because we can see them. But things like this are happening all the time. Green shore crabs appear to be restricted to brackish areas. I say appear because the survey wasn't designed from the offset to test that, and it's something we're going to be looking to doing, having found these results. Now, is this because of competition with the furrowed crabs? Maybe. And concerningly, with changing rainfall patterns, could we see our freshwater outputs being altered? And therefore, in islands like Alderney or other small islands where we don't have large estuaries, does that put our green shore crab populations at risk? Okay, so the edible crabs are infrequently encountered. We find very, very few since 2022, but no clear declines. Maybe that's a good sign. There are big concerns, especially with warming temperatures affecting their life cycle. But, maybe we just missed that decline. Has the population already crashed before we even started these surveys? And, of course, we have this alarming sex ratio. Is it temperature? Is it behaviour? Is it a sampling error? Are we just missing the females? We don't know. But that's something we're going to find out, hopefully. And what is the ratio in adults, importantly? So, what's next for our crab surveys? Well, firstly, I mentioned it a bit. We want to do a desk-based review to really understand what the implications of these results are. But most importantly, to understand where we want to go next. Do we want to focus in on looking at things like that brackish water? We want to refine the method and investigate things like targeted projects like MSCs. We love working with MSc students, and it's a great way to investigate specific bits of our kind of general monitoring effort. I presented this to our citizen science group before because I wanted them to see it, and they came up with the idea of a kind of crab most wanted, to find all the green shore crabs, because we don't know if there are green shore crabs in other areas. So hopefully next summer we'll get people sending us all the photos of green shore crabs if they can. And subtidal monitoring. We've had a blooming nightmare with this. It's an absolute nightmare because we never seem to catch any crabs in our subtidal traps. But it is important, in particular for understanding the green shore crabs, because they don't necessarily get picked up in the commercial data. And what can be done? Well, firstly, of course, to curtail these kind of warming temperatures which are driving this impact, it's reducing carbon in the atmosphere. And I'm sure there's a number of excellent people in this room who are working on projects to do just that. And we obviously have some in Alderney doing the same. That'd be great. But as a wildlife trust, what can we do? Well, we can consider like targeted conservation action. So we're using this data to try and look at, is there anything we actually could do? For example, protecting those areas of fresh water. If we know that it is important, if we can prove that, then we can look to protect them, stop developments from coming in which might alter those areas and things like that. That's the conclusion of my talk. I've sped through that. There's some references for you there. Thank you. And I'd just like to say thanks for listening. I've left a summary up there for you. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. That was such an interesting talk, and I really love the idea that crabs can be the pandas of the intertidal zone. Is like, hosting. Love it. Right, are there any questions from the room?
You made it.
Yeah.
Alex, one thing that we have observed on our intertidals, particularly with the green crab, is a vulnerability to these high temperature spikes. And I just wondered whether you've seen similar things where effectively what we're seeing is the green is virtually cooking in the beaches. And I just wondered whether you're seeing anything like that in Alderney.
We don't have quite as warm water as you in Jersey. It's a couple.
That's a plug for tourism.
Yeah, no, I mean it's lovely. Come swim. Come to Alderney. So we haven't. I don't know if you're seeing like mortality events. We haven't seen like mortality events with temperature in the summers. We've started collecting temperature data on our seas last year, and it's something that maybe we can start to pair with this. But at the moment, we haven't done it. But it's a good point. As I said, though, we are about 2 degrees colder on average, so it might be that we're just not seeing that yet. But it's alarming if you are that you are.
Brilliant. Can we probably have one more?
Just a quick one. The edible crabs, your main fishery, are you seeing changes in catches of them or changes in distribution, like they're moving further offshore or deeper water?
Yeah, the crab, it's our main fishery. Unfortunately, it's 2 boats. So it's now a very small fishery. And yeah, if you talk to the fishermen, they will tell you that, crab numbers have been declining for a number of years now, and they're not necessarily where they were. Where they are, they're less abundant. I have to say, we don't have we don't have access to super detailed fisheries data at the Wildlife Trust, but it's something we're hoping to get soon. So I could probably answer your question a bit better in a year or so. But yeah, in general, yes, the adult stocks are declining, and that's what really triggered these surveys in the first place. Was fishermen noticed that the number of adult brown crab or chancres or edible crab had really declined. And that's something happening. I know that's happening across the Channel Island region as well.
But it's not necessarily an overfishing.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to comment as to whether overfishing has an impact. I'm not sure. What I do know is likely to be having an impact is temperature. So increasing temperatures in summer and winter are going to make it really difficult for these species which have a planktonic life stage to survive. So it's probably a good reason why we're seeing some of these declines. But what I thought was really interesting when I was looking into this presentation is there's very little data or research on intertidal populations of crabs. I know it doesn't necessarily always link directly to how the fisheries are doing, but it does seem like an important stage in that life cycle as well. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, so temperature is probably a big one that's affecting them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions we've got time. So thank you so much. Right, so our next speaker is Jen Adams, who's going to be talking about the Manx, whale and dolphin.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm quite short, so I don't know how this lectern is. Do I need it a bit closer? Is that better? Yes. Yeah. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So my name's Jen Adams, and I'm the Outreach and Education Manager for Manx, Whale and Dolphin Watch. I've been with the charity for 13 years, and I've had Sorry, I'm really, really nervous today. I've had the pleasure of being with the group for 13 years, and I've seen it really grow and develop through this time. So I started out when the group was a little one-man band, and it was just a small research-led organisation, and I've seen it really grow and develop over the years. Sorry, I'm going to have to go. Sorry, guys, I speak publicly for a living, but I'm not very well at the moment, and I had a hospital thing yesterday. And I thought I'd be okay speaking today, but I'm not. I don't know if anybody from the Wildlife Trust wants to read through my slides for me. That you're more than welcome. But I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Steve, Manx Wildlife Trust. So I'm going to just go through the slides and let's see. So we've got arrow button. Yeah, this will be great. So thank you. So my knowledge of Maxwell and dolphins has gone on for 25 or so years. I filmed all of the species that we've got in local waters. I was friends with the founder of Maxwell Wildlife Whale and Dolphin Watch, John Dolphin, and so they founded in 2006, and it's based on boat and land surveys. So they do transects out at sea. They do photo identification. So you can take a photograph of a fin, dorsal fin of a dolphin. They'll have scratches and nicks on it, and they'll be able to take photos and see where that particular animal has been seen again. They've got public sightings networks. There's a recording site on their website and a visitors centre in Peel. And they organise also public sea watches, particularly at the Sound and Marine Drive, which are local hotspots for seeing whales and dolphins. So land-based surveys, they do temporal movements of each species, the relative abundance and distribution, social and behavioural interactions between individuals. So dolphins will do things like tail slapping, and they'll do kind of bob their heads up. There's a word for that, I can't think that. They poke their heads up and kind of have a look around and then go back down again. And there's another thing, they do logging as well, spy hopping, yes, that's it, and logging as well, where they'll just rest on the water like logs. There's boat-based surveys, so there's a boat that they've got harboured in Peel at the moment, and they will take photos from the boat and videos, and they've got the public sightings network as well. So they've got photo catalogues of the rissos and bottlenose dolphins, and they will keep records of the dolphins that come from Cardigan Bay. So there's a large pod, about 80 to 100 individuals, that will travel up from Cardigan Bay, pop to the Isle of Man for the day, do a lap of the island, eat all our fish, and then head back down again to Wales again afterwards. And they also do records with Scotland, Shetland, and Brittany as well as comparisons. So these are the main 6 species. And this can fluctuate. We've got basking sharks on this slide. Unfortunately, we've not really seen many basking sharks within the last 10 years. Not quite sure of the cause of that. Could be due to changing sea temperatures. Perhaps it might be due to electrical currents on the cabling underneath the Irish Sea. There are lots of different theories about that. I don't know the answer to that. So these 6 species, Risso's dolphins, mainly seen here during the summer months along this side of the island on the eastern coast. So that's seen April through to September. A large dolphin, similar in size to a bottlenose dolphin, but they have more grayer appearance and a flatter nose, bottlenose dolphins with that beak. We've got harbour porpoise, most common Manx cetacean. Cetacean is another word for whales and dolphins, and they are seen all around the island all year round, usually in small groups, 1s or 2s. We've got the common dolphin, so slightly smaller than the bottlenose dolphin and more offshore than the bottlenose and rissos. They can be in huge pods of up to 200 individuals. A very active species, cut through the water like a knife, very fast moving, will bow ride as well. And then there's the bottlenose dolphins. So you've got the Cardigan Bay gang that appear, but we've also now got 2 resident dolphins, and we've called them Moonlight and Starlight. And Moonlight is the mother, Starlight is the daughter, and this Starlight was born within Manx waters. So that's quite interesting that we've now got these 2 dolphins that this pair was seen on Monday in Douglas Bay, and they'll just travel around the Isle of Man. And then we've got minke whales, one of the smaller types of whale species, seen on the other side of the island, so on the western side of the island on the summer months. Probably feeding there, and then in the autumn and winter they will be seen on this side of the island, so on the eastern side. That will be for spawning, so we've got more gravel on this side of the island, which is better for the spawning of herring and other small fish. I wasn't meaning the dolphin spawns or the whale spawns. So yeah, we have fish that spawn off this side of the island in the autumn months, and the whales come down and eat them and ruin all their fun. And that starts kind of October time, and it can stretch from Laxey in the north down to Marine Drive in the south, just off the headland here. And so those are the main species, and then basking sharks, not really seen a lot of them. And there is a slide that's just slightly coming up next, which is Moonlight and Starlight. So mother and daughter, bottlenose dolphins. Moonlight, using these ID techniques of photographing dorsal fins, is identified as from the Moray Forth pod. So if you've seen pictures of Chanonry Point in Scotland, that's the pod there where they're all leaking out near the lighthouse in Scotland. So she originally from there came to the Isle of Man, gave birth, and has stayed here with her daughter. Daughter's nearly the size of mother now, and they hang around together. It's quite nice to see them, and the kind of pair of them travelling around. So 6 years old now, not known for interactions with other dolphins, which is interesting, and be interesting to see what her and the daughter did when this big pod from Cardigan Bay rocks up. Behaviour is similar to social solitary dolphins, and they're becoming increasingly habituated interacting with swimmers and other sea users. I saw them at Peel last month, and they were going around to the paddle boarders who were in the beach area, and seen most days in shallow sandy bays. So we've got a code of conduct released in 2022 with advice from BDMLR and Marine Connection, just to advise locals and visitors on how to behave around these animals. So sea swimming, kayaking, paddleboarding, and boats. Unusual sightings in recent years. So we had a swordfish in 2022. That's the only recorded sighting in the Irish Sea. And then white-beaked dolphin in 2024. They were off Langness in the south-eastern side of the island. And we had Atlantic bluefin tuna appearing just off the coast here. They slowly moving northwards into the Irish Sea. Sightings reported in Manx waters since 2022, averaging 2 reports per year. Okay, so this is a new user guide for Manx marine wildlife released in 2025. Brought together existing codes of conduct for seals, seabirds, cetaceans, basking sharks into one user-friendly booklet. And so it's about reporting what you see and how to behave next to wildlife. And there's a document here showing how to observe, respect, and enjoy these amazing creatures. So even the science teams. Oh yeah, there's copies of the leaflet at the back of the room if anyone would like to pick up one. And these rules and guidelines are also adopted by the researchers as well. So if you go out and you're taking photo IDs of these animals, you don't hang around following them all day. You just dip in, try and wait for them to come to you rather than you go to the dolphins, those sorts of things. Okay, and we've got a what, when and where users guide to key sensitive areas. And this shows the sorts of locations where these animals might be. I've just noticed there's 100 slides on this. And I'm up to number 27. Oh, is that everyone? So I'm going to have to really speak quickly now. Oh, second to last. Beautiful. So the visitor centre for Maxwell and Dolphin Watch is located in Peel, so as well as the Manx Wildlife Trust shop as well and offices. So Peel is the real epicentre of local wildlife charities. Okay, so that's thank you, and there's some nice footage of bottlenose dolphins around one of the lobster potland or the Carthaman Ferry, is that? Yeah. So, any questions?
So, Steve.
It's all right.
You're
welcome.
Yeah, we feel soon.
Yeah.
Are you happy for a few
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, go on. This could be a car crash.
Thanks very much. You did a great job. And, great to hear that Jen's okay.
Yeah.
On your trips, just wondered if you recently seen any loggerhead turtles or any mola, the sunfish at all?
Both species have been seen within the last 10 years. Loggerhead turtle, I think, would be about roughly quite far off. It was spotted on the other side of the island, just in the Arbor Bay. Was seen, I think, for a couple of days before heading off. Sunfish actually is more regularly seen. I think it will be about 5 or 6 years ago since the last one, maybe. More recently, again on the other side of the island, probably with the Gulf Stream moving up with the warmer waters through there. I've not seen one myself, but I know quite a few people who've been very lucky to see them. I don't know whether you're familiar with the sunfish, but it's enormous. It's the largest bony fish in the world, and they're like bigger than it's a circle that I can stretch my arms out to, and they'll just sit in the water, and one of their side flippers will flap away like that. So they are quite distinctive if you're in a boat and you spot one offshore. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, just wanted to ask a question about basking sharks, really.
Yeah.
We're from Lundy. We don't see any basking sharks anymore either. We used to see them quite regularly. So 20, 25 years ago. More dolphins have moved into the bay around about our island. But I just wondered if anybody in the room maybe had done any research into why basking sharks seem to be disappearing and sightings of them.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any kind of formal, this is the exact reason for it. That hasn't been announced. Certainly, somebody might have an answer there. Go on.
So I used to work in the Alderney and I had contacts with people who worked with basking sharks. And the main reason they say it's climate change.
Yeah.
So waters are getting warmer and just pushing them further north. If you see sightings in the outer Hebrides, they have declined a lot. It's like, that's my 2 cents.
So it's not just a case then, if that's the evidence, that it's not that they're taking a different route, because we were thinking they might be going around the western side of the island of Ireland rather than coming through the Irish Sea. But if there's reduced numbers as well getting to Scotland, then that might be.
Yeah, that's kind of what researchers are doing in that area, what they're saying.
Thank you. I think Jen might have something to add to this debate.
It's not my research, but I was party to some MSc students' results. They looked at some of the phytoplankton data, because we've got phytoplankton monitoring around the Isle of Man. We've got a very large longitudinal data set for that. There's been a significant reduction in the large, more nutrient-dense, I'm going to mispronounce it, sea pods. Somebody please correct me, because I'm sure that's wrong. But they appear to have moved further north, closer to Scotland, which could potentially have some link, because obviously it's the basking shark's main food, and if the nutrient-dense foods have moved north with climate change, that could well link. But it's a postulation; it's not a proven theory. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. I've dived and spent most weekends on boats here looking for basking sharks for 6 years. And I've had lots of conversations with Jackie and Graham, who set up Manx Basking Shark Watch, and so I'm going to speak for them now. They passionately believe that the industrialisation of the Irish Sea has been a big factor in the basking sharks now going around Ireland. And if you Google it, there are hundreds and hundreds of basking sharks on the west coast of Ireland every year. Big, wonderful images on Instagram of schooling basking sharks. So they passionately believe that it's the industrialisation. And if you don't know about Lasmobranch sharks, they have an electronic sensor in their nose, and they think that the cables from the wind, that's what they think. But there's no evidence for that. But they would say that if they were here. I think there's a climate change. There's lots of things. Maybe the sharks just have gone somewhere else for a few years, and in a few years they come back. But that's what Jackie and Graham would have said.
Right, thank you very much. Our next talk of the session is from Sammy from the Government of Jersey. He's going to be talking about the use of mapping to help inform management of the marine environment.
Hi everyone. Well, I didn't decide on one project to present, so I'm going to present lots of different bits of research that are going on in Jersey, with the link that there's different types of mapping tools or mapping technologies that we've been using, and how some of that fed into the Marine Spatial Plan. Francis will be jumping in at the end as well. So just a quick summary about some of the spatial issues that we have. The marine environment in Jersey, particularly the coastal areas, are we're experiencing spatial squeeze. Lots of people want to do lots of different things in the same spaces. We have lots of habitats, special habitats like seagrass and mow, and just generally nice coastal areas that we want to try and preserve and conserve for future generations. and working out where all of those things are, what's happening, where the conflict is, where's the key values in those areas. And so one of the first things, I'll go through some of the different spatial data that we have and how we've been using that information to help inform decisions for management. So things like aerial images, really good seagrass monitoring, habitat modelling, which I'll talk about, which is mainly Paul's gig. For anyone who's been to previous ones, Paul Chambers is a whiz at that stuff, and I will try to do it justice. Marine spatial planning, tracking species using things like tags or hydrophones, looking at the seabed topography itself, so getting a better, more higher resolution image of the seabed, and then IVMS is the new layer that we're adding in to better understand where fishing is happening. So this is something that Paul did a few years back. It's understanding, trying to get a very high resolution map of our intertidal. So he used lots of different sources, aerial imagery, ground truth field work, and from the aerial images, pulling out the different RGB bands, so trying to work out what different colour signature relates to which habitat, and then extrapolating that across the whole of the aerial image. We use LiDAR as well, so getting the sea height, the height of the seabed to then further specify those habitats. And then we end up with a very good habitat map of the intertidal that takes forever to load in GIS because there's so many points. It crashes a lot of the time when I try and pull this up. And this has been invaluable for a lot of research that's come afterwards. And this is the sort of data set we'll give to students when we have them, if they're trying to do any research that's habitat based or is looking at the use of those areas and the impacts on habitats. They've already got the spatial data as to where that is. And then that was further expanded to the subtidal area. So this is not quite as detailed. We don't have an aerial image of the seabed, unfortunately. It's a little bit more hard to see, sort of out of sight. But there is lots of data sets that have been pulled together for this, looking at the depth and the exposure of different areas where we already know there are habitats. Lots of data sets from stakeholders have fed into these as well. So dive surveys from Jersey Marine Conservation, survey work that's been done by the Société Jersiaise. There's been data that's been collected for years and years, and this is all fed into these models, and we end up with a lovely subtidal and intertidal habitat map. And we've been using this a lot for, like the intertidal map, for further research. So at the moment, one of the methods for this was described in the Blue Carbon Resources reports. That's you can find that on the website. And the reason the habitat map was created was to do the blue carbon research, so looking at the different habitats, whether they contribute to like a source of carbon, whether it's an accumulation area, whether it's somewhere where it's being sequestrated, and then we can use that for managing areas as well. But this map can be used for a lot more than blue carbon, so working out where our key habitats are, things like OSPAR habitat. Jersey is a signatory to OSPAR, and we are obliged to look after kelp, seagrass, and mull. And so when we know where it is, it's a lot easier to do that. And this is a very simplified version of the map. There's actually like 65 habitat codes that go into this, but that doesn't really work when you're putting a key on a small slide. So they're sort of grouped into their main. This is the sedimentary area. This is muddy. This is sand mason. This is mull, and then they can be further split up based on the other species that are living in those areas. And that's one of the big data sets that fed into the Marine Spatial Plan. So for anyone who doesn't know, we had our Marine Spatial Plan got voted through last year, almost a year ago now, so it's gone very quickly. But we had a whole series of pulling data sets together. There's actually 170 different separate data sets, and a lot of them were not owned by government. They come from local organisations and institutions and charities that had a passion in the marine environment for years. And it meant that we could really get going straight away with the Marine Spatial Plan. And a lot of those evidence bases and data sets are explained in some of those other reports that feed into the Marine Spatial Plan, if anyone's interested, but I won't go into them because it'll take me hours. And then we had a stakeholder consultation. So this is another form of mapping, but we're trying to map the values of stakeholders to the marine environment. We don't have a lot of information about who uses different areas of the beach, what they use it for, or further afield into the subtidal. what they value, but we were also asking what issues they saw in the marine environment, and then we can start to work out where the conflicts are and what needs to be addressed going forward. And that all fed into the final plan, and we have lots of different priorities coming out of that. But the one I want to focus on is the marine protected areas. So that was one of the big key elements of the marine spatial plan, and there's lots of different criteria that fed into the plan, including the map. And we've got lots of layers, including current MPAs, blue carbon areas, productive shallow sea areas, ospar habitat, sensitive species, and high biodiversity hotspots. And we end up with a final proposal, which is very small, but I'll show it on a bigger map in a sec. The final proposal that went through, and then it went through another round of consultation, and then we end up with the final areas that went through to states debate. That on a bigger map. So that was the pre-consultation one, which was all bubbly, and then lots of people said, I can't navigate around that, I need it to be straight. And then also some of those areas got chopped and changed based on economic importance or further information that was put forward. And we've ended up with the black hashed areas will be marine protected area this time next year. And then we're doing further research into the pink areas. I was hoping to present data on that today as well, but it's not quite ready. It's probably like another month away until we can say exactly which of those areas will or won't be protected. And that's just a prettier version of the map. I didn't realise I hadn't overlaid it. So we've got this is our sort of the habitats and the values of areas and what we're going to be protecting going forward, and that's protection from mobile gear, so trawling and dredging. So all other types of fishing are still allowed in these areas, the ones that aren't having a destructive impact on the seabed, apart from the tiny green one at the bottom, which will be no take zone. So no fishing, because it's a very highly biodiverse site. And so moving on from that, we also are trying to build up data on species. So we've got a good understanding of where habitats are now. We will keep improving on that over time, but we've got the base, and now we also want to understand what's using these spaces. And so we've got the hydrophone array, which is across the Channel Islands. We don't have the full results yet, but we've got Paul Chambers working on the data from this, looking at where the highest activity is for dolphins and porpoises. And we've got a few little snippets, which some of this should be in the Ramsar report, which is coming out soon. My colleague Kerry's doing a lot of work on that. But Paul has been assessing the frequencies of the activity of those two species around the Channel Islands, and I thought it might be of interest to the other fellow Channel Islanders. So Guernsey, we've got this is 2023 and 2024, and we've got dolphins on the left, porpoises on the right, and it does change a lot from location to location, and some sea pods have been in place longer than others. We've got C pods and F pods, and it turns out the F pods are a lot better at detecting them than the C pods, so we're going to have to try and standardise that going forwards. And then Sark, they really liked Sark in dolphins in particular really liked Sark in 2023 and 2024. The minkies, somewhere that we normally see quite a lot of activity, wasn't showing a lot of activity on the F pods, so that's something to look into a bit more. And then Alderney, also good hotspot for dolphins. And there's some evidence that porpoises are only really coming in the winter, and you can see there's difference along the bottom. There's the season. Those results aren't complete yet, so hoping to try and convince Paul to come next year and present on that, because he'll do a much better job. And then bluefin tagging, bluefin tuna tagging, trying to understand where the tuna population, the tuna that are coming to Jersey now, we've been getting them coming through in the last 5 years or so. We had a lot of them to begin with. They seem to have tailed off a little bit now. We're only really getting the small ones in Jersey. We're not getting any of the big hogs, as they're called, that they find in Cornwall. So I think potentially it's an area that juveniles are coming to feed and have a bit of feed up before they go on the rest of their migration. So Exeter University have been coming over to tag them, and this is with satellite tags, so we get their whole track when those tags pop off. And this is just one of many tuna that have been tagged, and we're really starting to build up that picture now. And we've been talking with the guys doing the shearwater research to try and see if we can link up what's going on, because we think they're following the same bait, at least to some extent. And then shark and ray tagging. So this is the newest one, and I forgot to put a PhD student's name on here, which is poor form of me. So this is Reese Money who's doing this work. We've only just tagged the first few sharks and rays as part of this project. And again, someone else I think would be good to give a talk once we've got some results. So we're looking at the 3 main ray species in Jersey. And we're using the same sort of tags that have been going on. I should have said earlier, this CPOD map. There's also fish and tail receivers on here, so they're listening out for tagged fish. And that was part of an older project where they were tagging tuna, bream, with some other species tagged in the UK like bass and crawfish. But a lot of those have sort of come to the end of their life now, but they're still out there listening for tagged fish, so we can put new tags out and they should pick them up. Though we are having a few issues with the new tags, not quite talking to them, so it's a work in progress. But the idea with this one is we manage our ray fishery based off of ICES quotas, and their research is done sort of across a much wider area, and we think that our ray species are very resident. They're not going from Jersey to the Channel, and we have them in different proportions to what ICES are seeing. So there are some that we can catch more of where we don't really have a lot of them, and there's some that we can't catch at all, but we've got loads of them in Jersey. So we don't think it's quite proportionate to local management. And if we can show that with spatial data, so we've tagged them here, we only recorded them here, they never went across the Channel. There's also a genetic element to this as well to help further understand that. So that's hopefully will help improve our management if we can put that forward to the higher up management than us. And the taupe we think probably is going across. The taupe go quite a long way. We had a few tagged last year, and one of them, their tags popped off in the North Sea, so which was that's more recent. Unless there was something wrong with that tag. But the other one popped off really close in, and the other 2 tags haven't been quite so. We didn't find them. So we're still data deficient on the taupe tagging at the moment, and we'll hope to continue that. I will get Reese to come and talk about that more. I've got 2 minutes left, and I've definitely put too many examples in here. This is bream nests, so we've been using different data. For those of you who don't know, bream create nests to lay their eggs in. That like depression in the seabed there is a bream nest. It's much easier to see on like the high res version of the photo. And we were trying to work out where those were so we could better protect them in that part of their season, because if you trawl for bream during that part of their life, then they're not going to contribute to the next generation. And that was we had to get lots of different types of data on that. So we've got the benefit topography, the habitat drop cam, so just seeing what the habitat type was like along there, where there were nests, and where that linked up with the different habitats and associated species, and then use that to work out exactly how many we thought there would be in that survey area. And that's now closed to trawling during their breeding season. And then aerial imagery for seagrass is one that's really, really good, always easy to analyse, and it's very consistent. And we can see that our seagrass has been expanding naturally in Jersey for the last few years. We had the wasting disease as well way back when, but in more recent years it's doing really well, and it's expanding for reasons that we don't know, but we're basically just going to make sure we don't add any pressures onto it and hope it just continues to do its thing. But there's that little bit here that's increasing to the south, we think is to do with there being aquaculture tables there for oyster aquaculture. We think it stabilised the seabed enough, the sediments enough for the seagrass to expand naturally. And we've got a student writing that up right now, and there should hopefully be a paper to go with that. And then the final thing, I haven't left Francis very much time, is IBMS, and this is the final, a big bit of the picture that we've been missing for a while. This is inshore vessel monitoring systems. This is the data to date from the beginning of this year to now. This is all of the fishing activity, and we can start using this to understand who's fishing where and how much they're catching, and really like make that spatial management better. Do you want to say anything else? Okay. That's everything.
Thank you so much. What a great talk. Those maps all look so beautiful, and I'm really jealous of your IIEM25. That looks amazing.
Yeah.
Great resource. Are there any questions from the room? Stunned silence.
Well, sorry, I'm not trying to talk. Look through the hand. What about the French scallop boats? How does that fit into your MPA planning and your marine spatial planning?
So they were consulted as well throughout the process, and they are aware of what's going on. We've been going back to have further consultations with them, but there will be some political votes. Yeah, it's not going to be the easiest thing to get through, but it's a work in progress. I don't know if Francis has more to say on the projects. No.
So there was a meeting in Granville last week, and if you read French press, you'll have seen that they've started to say that this is the end of Granville fishing port, and that they're all going to be out of a job because of what Jersey's doing. But it's the wider picture of what's happening because of the conversion of Natura 2000 sites, the show safe protected areas. So they're worried about the impact of marine protection on dredging. Well, we're worried about the impact of dredging on marine protection, but it is a big thing. It's a big change in livelihoods for these guys. So we're doing an economic impact assessment on French and Jersey vessels, which is being published in November. The French are doing their own assessment, and it's going to get a bit lively over the next 6 to 9 months, we think. But we feel we've got the data and the science on our side to argue for marine protection for these areas. We're doing it for OSPAR, for Ramsar, for all the conventions we're signed up to for the right reasons. And we're it's bad for dredgers and trawlers, but it's good for static fishers and scallop divers and all of these other things. So we feel it's the right balance for our seas and for a sustainable fishery for the island. But it is going to make some headlines at some point, I imagine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I think our next talk is from Peter Duncan. I don't actually have well, we have been pretty aware made a note, but I didn't. But yeah, Peter Duncan from DEFA on, I'm imagining, marine management.
Thank you very much for that. I work for DEFA in marine conservation principally, and interesting, perhaps unusually, I'm part of the fisheries division. That might seem slightly contradictory, but the purpose of this talk is to perhaps explain why that is and the process that we've taken to develop our fisheries, and why, as was alluded to yesterday, we think we've been successful in part of that. And it's really interesting to just the themes that have been talked about the last few days, and particularly that last one. You see those themes coming up and basically compare and contrast to how we've done things in the Isle of Man. You all know where you are, but I think in the context of what I'm going to talk about, I just wanted to say what some of the drivers are for conservation and fisheries. We aren't UK, aren't EU, and so the conservation drivers that may affect the UK in particular don't really affect us in terms of directives and statutory obligations, etc. But the fisheries management principles are shared across the British Isles, and therefore there's a lot of similarity between them. It has been mentioned that 87% of our of the Manx territory is water. Our territorial sea goes out to 12, much as with everyone else. And our marine environmental management is really supported by our domestic legislation. So again, different and similar to many of the islands, but different from the UK in that sense. We've got the Wildlife Act, Fisheries Act, and Water Pollution Act, etc. Interestingly, in comparison with the last talk, we have no marine spatial plan yet, although that is slightly in progress. But there are relics of that. We started out with a marine plan, and we have a summary of the marine environment as part of the Manx Marine Environmental Assessment, which is available online, which was developed as an instrument or tool for developers. It is, as we've mentioned throughout the last few days, a really busy area. We have a lot of this is a general infrastructure map, but it's a busy sea area. There's a lot of cables and pipelines and things running throughout the Northern Irish Sea. Wind farms are obviously a topical issue. We have various proposed and various under different stages of development planning, etc. We have our own domestic issues such as dredge spoil disposal adjacent to marine protected areas, etc., which is an interesting challenge. And of course, we also have fishing activity. I'll come back to this one later in the talk, but in 2006, the IC statistical square around the Isle of Man was the most heavily dredged area in the British Isles. So that's an interesting starting point to how we've got to where we are today, which is not exactly the same case. It's quite a varied territorial sea, ranging from oceanic influenced and deeper waters to the west of us to much more terrestrially influenced and shallower waters to the east of us. Again, comparison, we have UNIS classification on a broad scale for the territorial sea and some finer scale closer into, particularly in the marine protected areas. But I think the emphasis on having good marine data and being able to apply that and supported by ENGOs, the government itself, as well as our academic partners, is really key to how we've approached marine management on the island. But I think overall it's quite a challenging place to work and try to balance all of these things. I mentioned drivers for marine conservation in particular. I think there's a general recognition that we have a responsibility to protect the marine environment, not least of all because of ecosystem services, tourism benefits, and also commercial benefits like that. And we have domestic legislation to support that, but as you can see, the Wildlife Act and the Fisheries Act are starting to look a little bit old and are probably not as up to date and responsive as we need them to be. And we also have, as mentioned previously, we're signatory via the UK to a lot of the international conventions, which drives us, and similarly to the biosphere status, there's a requirement to have core protected areas, but they're not statutory responsibilities in the strictest sense. So that offers some flexibility without the responsibility that Jackie said before, but there's pros and cons to that. So we're trying to balance being good citizens, but not always having the flexibility to do that, but not always having a legal responsibility to achieve that. So actually, primary way that I think we do marine conservation is through area-based conservation. As we said, as the last talk about marine protected areas, although there is species-specific protections in place. The way we do that is through our marine nature reserves. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail about how they develop, but we have, they go up to highest astronomical tide. They're designated via the Wildlife Act. And there are 10 of them, all of which are within 3 nautical miles, and they cover about 11% of our territorial waters, which met our obligations under CBD, but since they've now changed the rules, not the rules, but the lines on that, we're still working out what 30 by 30 means for us. But certainly in terms of the original CBD, we achieved that. There are also other, within the Wildlife Act, national nature reserves and ASSIs, which that isn't a complete picture of them, but you can see that some of them are coastal and some overlap with the coastal areas, and that allows a little bit of integration across protection from terrestrial and marine. But perhaps most interestingly, this is a recent map of protections within the marine environment via the Fisheries Act and via our fisheries management. And it's quite comprehensive, and the pink areas are the marine nature reserves, but the other areas are annual or multi-annual protections for fisheries conservation purposes. And while they're a little bit more temporary and variable, they contribute quite significantly, and that's really some of the gist of my talk. I did include some of the highlights of habitats and species, some of which have been covered, so I'll skip over these reasonably quickly. But in terms of, we have a really high biodiversity horse mussel reefs here in particular. There is a I won't let this run too long due to time constraints, but really the cold water coral reef equivalents. There's a lot of biodiversity, and it's one that the Little Ness one just off Marine Drive here is probably the most biodiverse horse mussel reef yet recorded in the British Isles. We have eelgrass, we have merle, the eelgrass not so abundant, but the merle is quite extensive. We have good areas of kelp forest and rocky reef, etc. And more recently, we've paid a lot more attention to the mud belt to the west of us, which is an important fishery area. But as Jackie mentioned earlier, it's our biggest blue carbon store. So we've had some attention, additional attention on that, which I'll refer to in a second. In terms of species highlights, Steve and Jen very well presented some of the highlights in terms of cetaceans. We've got regionally, nationally, internationally important bristles, bottlenose dolphin, pods, common dolphins are increasing. Briefly mentioned the basking sharks. The inshore herring is a particularly important thing in terms of feeding, particularly at this time of year. So we've got a big grey seal population, possibly touching around 400, and minke whale, which come, as mentioned before, just out in the bay here, even feeding on herring. Regionally important seabird areas, as well as some of the slightly more bizarre species such as sunfish, swordfish, etc. And recently a Cuvier's beaked whale. And not to mention the various invertebrates, including Arctic clam, and nudibranch, which is quite a rare species and occurs actually in the bay here, which is Beaumont's nudibranch. It's only recorded from British Isles and Norway. So quite a lot to protect. And again, as we've been talking, how do you achieve that in the presence of all of those other pressures on the marine environment, and particularly fisheries? This pie chart on the right shows our most important fisheries, which is scallops and queen scallops. This is value, but in terms of tonnage and therefore fishing effort, really. Queen scallops and scallops are our most important fisheries, and those are two bottom-toed ears, dredge and trawl. And actually, we also, although we don't participate in it, the nephrops fishery in the mud belt is a massively important fishery, but not prosecuted by us, but rather UK boats do that. So we have relatively unfavourable types of fishing gear in our waters quite extensively, although we do have 3 to 4 static fishing activities, but that's an additional challenge, is balancing existing and important fisheries with protecting the marine environment. And so I thought about what are the fundamental similarities or the mechanisms that we do it, and I think there are commonalities between conservation of the basic marine environment for biodiversity purposes, but also for fisheries purposes. Poorly or unmanaged fisheries benefit no one, and I think the synergies between both conservation of fisheries and conservation of other species is the approach we've taken. So how have we really gone from being the most dredged scallop area in the British Isles with relatively open access? And we've had some horror stories in recent years where the start of the season we've had upwards of 80 vessels turning up in fairly small areas, and the damage that does to the seabed has been significant. And moving towards much lower vessel access. It's not exactly one, but that's a much more calming picture than the previous one. We've moved from 200 vessels to around about 60 in the space of just over 15 years or so. Applying comprehensive surveys, application of data, widespread use of closed areas, and actually the highest stock levels that we've seen since records began. And I think the approach that we've taken is really promoting a conservation attitude to fisheries. There's various stages in that, and the first one was to actually demonstrate the benefits of conservation to the fishing industry. In simple terms, that graphic shows that inside and outside of closed areas, you get larger scallops and older scallops, which contribute much more significantly to recruitment processes. But all the data like that doesn't actually translate to fishermen and what we or published papers. And what we've seen is actually fishermen actively fishing around closed areas, which demonstrate spillover effects, etc. So the proof of the pudding is in what fishermen actually see on the ground. And our first marine protected area was actually developed in collaboration with the fishing industry, including a large area, the purple spot in the middle, which demonstrated that conservation from a marine protected area perspective doesn't necessarily limit fishing, although it's managed in a slightly different way. And again, the productivity of that area has actually increased since that marine protected area was established. And in fact, our marine protected area network now was basically developed primarily from fisheries conservation areas, and they've just evolved over time into what they are now. So they've grown up with the idea that fishing is not necessarily incompatible with conservation in that sense. In terms, the other two main drivers, I think from my perspective, is the use of data to drive proper fisheries management. That requires a lot of resource and a good data set stretching back to around 1992 or so, and the application of competent fisheries scientists, which we employ along with government officers. We've had stock surveys going back to 1992, so good long data sets, and actually applied those data to the fisheries management. And the persistence of that approach, as well as engaging the fishing industry in the application of the surveys, has been really important. So we've reached a point where our stock status for, in this case, scallop, is the highest it's ever been. And we're actually, because of the quality of the data, we can actually manage each individual ground. So rather than thinking of the stock as within the territorial sea, we can actually look at metrics on each of the individual grounds and manage them on that basis, which is a massive step forward. In all of this, involvement of the fishing industry, from the establishment of the marine protected areas through to conducting surveys and their involvement in actually determining how the fisheries management occurs, particularly through organisations or bodies such as the Scallop Management Board, has been really integral to it. And my colleague in fisheries said, I couldn't put it better than that, but moving beyond just stakeholder engagement, asking them what they think, but actually to genuine participation in the fisheries management has been a key factor. So I think really just to finish off, the similarities between conservation, marine conservation and fisheries, using those dot points, is knowing where the organisms and the habitats are, so the presence of them. And we've looked at mapping of or modelling of recruitment of scallops, both from a local perspective and also from an Irish Sea perspective. So knowing what the source and the sink populations are, knowing where they are, and then applying management. These are the actual fishing grounds. So applying the fisheries management on the fishing grounds, just as we would apply management of biodiversity important species within marine protected areas, and then applying those principles of sustainable exploitation in relation to fisheries and conservation. So the conservation of the fisheries areas is based on the surveys, and we, as I said, I alluded to at the beginning, we close those areas for varying periods depending on the state of stock and the effort on the ground, as it were. So I think that summary, treating fisheries species more like any other conservation value species, is really the key to it, and not in isolation, but as part of the ecosystem as a whole. So I think there are probably more similarities than differences in our fisheries management approach to the conservation approach. I'll skip that slide and just leave it open for any questions.
Thank you so much for that talk. What a wonderful talk to finish this morning on, and that felt like a really good news story. Oh yeah, and yeah, I think the other Channel Islands, when we're hearing about our stocks and our fishing data, generally always quite a bleak picture. So yeah, that is a really positive note.
It has taken a long time. It's a 30-year process, but it really is interesting to see the application of IBMS data, which really presents it in a spatial sense. So comparisons are interesting.
Brilliant. So are there any quick questions from the room? People were thinking about their study. And I'm quite interested to know a bit more about the engagement with the fishermen and how, do you see a lot less opposition now and from, communicating those benefits and those stock increases, or has it really only been the increase in stock that have sort of changed those views?
No, it's been a process, and that's why I talk about things like persistence. There was a lot of skepticism about the data and the implications of the science data and the implications of how it might be applied, and that genuinely took 5 to 10 years to work through. But I think there was the skepticism and things like the survey, they didn't believe the data. So involving the fishing industry in the survey collect, so they do the bits in between. So they believe in the data, and when we all sit in a room and work it all out, the fisheries management through the Scallop Management Board is actually almost boring these days, because the data comes in and everyone says, well, it's pretty obvious what we're going to do. So we've definitely moved on, but it did take quite a while to achieve that position.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, and I imagine quite a lot of resources as well to really build those relationships.
Very much so. Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, there's goodness, hands everywhere. We've got time for 2 quick ones.
Have you noticed, because of the length of the time that this project's been going, have you noticed that the younger fishermen coming up through the ranks, are they more amenable to thinking about this stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Shifting baselines works in both perspectives. The younger fishermen are used to marine protected areas, and they see how it works, and they've never had it so good in some respects. So yeah, that's definitely a positive aspect, and I think it's certainly engaging. We thinking about succession planning in the fishing industry like anything else, and engaging them in the Scallop Management Board from an early stage is really important, definitely.
Well, and I think it was a hand, just there, final question.
I'm asking this question on the basis I was in the west coast of Scotland this summer, and I was in a restaurant and I noticed hand-picked scallops was on the menu. I just wondered, are you working on developing alternative ways of actually catching scallops in a friendlier way?
Yeah, we are. We haven't gone down the line of diver caught scallops, whereas Scotland obviously has for many years. But interestingly, we've been running a trial on what colloquially called disco scallops. It's basically catching scallops using light within traps, and we've run some trials on the west coast of the island, including in marine protected areas. Actually, partly because the scallop densities are really high in there, and it's a nice experiment to see whether it's a density dependent catching method, but also there is the potential to exploit scallop stocks in a marine protected area, despite the potential conflict with that. That's yet to be determined, but certainly we've been working with the developers of those pots and with a couple of the potting fishermen here. We'll see what happens, but I think that's one of the interesting areas of development that hasn't really progressed terribly much, where we're still using fairly primitive gears to catch scallops, although we have for many years moved away from dredges for catching queen scallops. That's using otter trawl, which isn't as bad, But I think it's an interesting point and definitely one for the future is geotechnology development.
Right, thank you so much, everybody, for another fantastic session. I realise lunch is being served, so I won't hold you guys up, but I just want to take this opportunity, I suppose, to thank all of the speakers and also to the Manx Wildlife Trust for arranging just an absolutely fantastic conference. It's I'm pleased to say the 15th IIEM I've attended. I've managed to make every single one since 2010, and really every single year. It just sort of, it gets better and better and better. And this has been no exception. It's been absolutely wonderful. And so grateful for you all for such a huge amount of work that's gone into it. So if I may, a huge round of applause for I'd also like to take this opportunity to formally announce that Guernsey are volunteering to pick up the baton for next year's IIEM. I realise this isn't the end of the conference, but as people might not be around tomorrow, I'd like everybody to pencil in their diaries for September the 30th and October the 1st and 2nd, 2026 in Guernsey. Pencil it in for now. And obviously, if there's any big flags that anyone knows of, any other sort of, conferences that may be as important as this one. I'm sure there aren't any in the world, but if there are any date clashes, please do let us know. But otherwise, we will look forward to welcoming everybody into Guernsey who's able to make it next year. And again, thank you again.
Julia, thank you so much for chairing that session so well. It was, again, another great session to finish on, really interesting. And so that's it for the plenaries of the main IIEM. Obviously, we've got the additional day tomorrow, but I'm aware that some of you won't be coming tomorrow. So for those travelling home today, thank you for coming in. Please have a safe journey. Obviously, enjoy your excursions this afternoon. Enjoy your evenings this evening. For those who are coming back tomorrow, we're going to be joined by some more guests, and it's going to be a really interesting day where, for me, I'm really excited about this, where we get to combine yourselves, the conservationists, and businesses, and get some shared language and some shared purpose there, and see where we can take that. And that, for me, is really, really exciting. Thank you once again to all our chairs and our speakers today, especially Steve for stepping in. I just want to give a big shout out to Jen. I've worked with Jen for a number of years. She's an amazing woman. They do a huge amount of great work at Manx and Dolphin Watch, and I'm pleased to say she is okay and she's being looked after. So thank you to her. And it just leaves it for me to say your packed lunch is at the back of the room, and enjoy your excursions this afternoon.